would like to take advantage of this debate and ask you one question about, let's say, this controversial text that you published, I think, some months ago, the European Manifesto. No? Because here in Brazil, we asked if you didn't accept a type of presupposition that, say, in this text, that the presupposition that freedom is a kind of European invention. No? Social freedom is a kind of European invention. What do you think about that?
I know I did it as a provocation. No, my original experience was that how I noticed that today it's fashionable to be anti-European, not only for good reasons, Latin Americans, but like Trump. Trump is for states, but he's horrified by the idea of European Union. Putin does everything to destroy it. China and so on. And I think maybe it was a mistake that nonetheless the European legacy of enlightenment, women's rights and all that is worth fighting for. What does it mean? I don't ask the question in abstract terms. I know what horrors were done on behalf of human rights. Or let me give you another example. Was it Robin Blackburn or who pointed this out? How at the very time when Europe went into this liberalist mood of human freedom and so on against slavery, they almost exclusively used the term slavery in a metaphoric sense. You know, we are a worker shouldn't be enslaved to his master. Woman even shouldn't be enslaved. But at the same time, with explosion of capitalism, 17th century and almost, capitalism performed an explosion of new actual slavery from Africa and so on. And isn't it paradox that the very point when all Europe was talking about freedom against slavery, it was strictly almost metaphoric slavery, like slavery of the worker, religious slavery, and so on. But what about the factual slavery? And this is what I'm very sensitive to this. In a new text of mine, I even found another wonderful example of how not only liberal, but even the leftist economic reasoning can be used for racist oppression. Do you know a passage? I quoted it, but I don't think it already appeared. John Locke, the great liberal freedom. You know, or was it Hume afterwards? Okay, one of the two. He provided a most perverse pro-labor argument for cleansing the American land, North Americano, from Native Americans. In his reasoning for this very Marxist almost one. Private property is in principle bad. It should only be allowed if it's the result of your work, if you work on it. Like, you can have land, but it must be, okay, maybe you have some servants, but basically it must be land on which you work. Maybe you can have a small factory, but it must be yours. And now comes the perversity. He says that American Indians, Native Americans, don't do this because they leave their land unused, non-productively. So, as workers, if a white farmer comes there and has said to an Indian tribe, fuck off, I will use this land productively, as a leftist who thinks work creates blah, 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 you have a wonderful example of how a relatively very progressive argumentation can be turned against, you know. So here I totally agree with those like the one whom I really appreciate, Alvaro Garcia Linera and others, who claimed, and this is again a topic for COVID now, how this old lesson which feminists brought out, that yes, we have the big exploitation, wage-free worker, formally free, is exploited, blah, blah. But this exploitation only works if you have what I think Marxists usually call non-valorized work. Servants, officially non-employed, women who do the homework, other, and so on. And this is not just like one step. Ideally, we will all be wage workers. No, capitalism needs this to function. You need this non-valorized work. And I think, and I even quote somewhere, although they are going a little bit too quickly, some pupils of Bruno Latour, who introduced the term existential exploitation. Well, they take the example, for example, it's a margin. Okay, Ecuador. Western countries, you must know, are there ruining the countryside. Mostly, they don't even employ native tribes there. So, formally, in a strict Marxist sense, nobody is exploited there. But nonetheless, they are ruining their livelihood. They are alienating from them their environment, their conditions of existence. And even many things which are usually dismissed as banditry can be explained in this way. Like, now they control it. You remember a couple of years ago, the big topic was pirates in Somalia, robbing ships there. Somali coast there was totally depleted by foreign fishing boats. And it was out of pure despair that all those fishers there, okay, fuck it, we don't get fish, let's attack the boats there, and so on. So this compels us, I think, to redefine today in a new way the notion of who is a proletarian, as Linera put it, to get free of this fetish that the true worker, the pure proletarian, and so on, And this, I think, is what we were, at least we in Europe, I don't know how it was with you, were forced to confront with the pandemic. All those, like, okay, it's a classical example, but it's nice, mostly women, healthcare workers, those who deliver food, and so on. All of a sudden, we became aware of these other forms of exploitation, So we have to be dynamic here. But back to your point, what I believe in is that, nonetheless, the European legacy created something which has, maybe I'm too utopian here, but which has a great potential to be not only perfectly appropriated by others, but appropriated by others in a way better than European themselves. You can imagine what is my big example here, Haiti Revolution. They were in some sense more French than the French themselves. And again, here, the honor goes to Jacobins, who were the only ones to admit it, that fully acknowledged Toussaint Louverture and others. You know what Napoleon did then? He sent the army there, and he said that this is such a dangerous precedence that it's not enough to enslave them again. They should all be killed and new slaves. And even I saw the United States, do you know that even the most liberal leftist, Thomas Jefferson, said something horrible against Toussaint Louverture? That he is already... But if you measure him by today's standards, Toussaint Louverture was very modest. He was obsessed by, let's not throw out the white. Let's keep a product. He was very moderate in this sense. It didn't matter. So this is my vision. Not we, Europe, will guide you, but we put certain, let's call it, ideological field into open, which can be built on in better way than we Europeans do by others, and especially important, what I still like in European legacy is that it always had this openness for self-criticism, in the sense of, it's part of European approach to always question yourself and so on and so on. So again, I think that today, if you look at what's happening on and new dangers of authoritarian capitalism, of new fundamentalist, nationalist capitalism, again, the new axis of evil and so on, I still believe that it would be false to simply adopt anti-Eurocentrism. Like I had to laugh in Chile, I had a conflict, where they attacked me as a Eurocentrist, then manifesto, no? And I told them, ha, 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 look who is there. Spanish colonizers. You know what I mean, I told them that, and this is an old paradox, for example. Do you know that, not that I'm in any sense for colonialism, British were opportunists, but I read now a history of the first years of the United States, the revolution, so-called. I totally agree here with Jean-Claude Milner, that the only true revolution was the French Revolution. American Revolution was a fake. You know what's always good to know? Do you know that George Washington was the richest man in America? And do you know that if you compare support for the independence revolution, the more you go down, the more ordinary people were pro-British. Those who protested in Boston about taxing the tea, they were the rich ones who were importing tea. But what I want to say is that it's an old paradox that in the war for independence, British, okay, they manipulated them, but they were much kinder towards Native Americans. Native Americans, that's why Native Americans, Indians, whatever you call them, took the British side mostly. And that's why George Washington did some horrible things, ordering all tribes, inclusive women, children, to be shot, and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is that today, in this crazy situation where Trump is anti-European, in Europe itself, Orban and so on, that a certain reference to European legacy can be useful. Because again, the danger I see today is, although I admire them as what they, as I wrote, China. What did the Chinese do? Something wonderful, cynically. The West fears two things usually: wild, chaotic, brutal capitalism and strong authoritarian state. The Chinese combined these two, And so the point is how to, I don't think that, my dream is this one, something like Haiti. I think Europe is too tired, decadent to propose it, but we need someone, maybe Mandela, but it didn't work, was on the right path, basically, in South Africa, where he always emphasized, Mandela, screw our original traditions, The original black traditions were from the beginning manipulated by the apartheid regime. So in this sense, only I think that European legacy can play a positive role, and the proof is precisely that this is why Europe is more and more attacked. I mean, who are these Eurocentrists today? Those in Europe, like Salvini, Orban, and so on, no, they are multi-racist, multiculturalist, whatever. They always say, just not united Europe. But united Europe is, for me, nonetheless, if you look, everybody likes to complain about, in Europe, about Brussels, bureaucracy, and so on. But sorry, I looked at what Europe is. Okay, there are some crazy bureaucratic measures, but many of them are measures to protect workers' rights, to protect women's rights, gay rights, and so on and so on. I think we need something like this. There is nothing bad if some power stronger than a single state posits a limit to anti-feminism and so on and so on.